Do we feel ready to go? Hello, everyone. Welcome to the Intergenerational Housing Learning Network. It's so wonderful to have you here today. We have about 21 people joining us. And so if you would be so kind to put in the chat your name and where you're zooming in from, that would be wonderful. We love to build that sense of community with everybody today. We have a great speaker today. I'm excited for all of you to meet Ms. Savannah Fishel. But before we do that, I'm going to turn it over to my colleague, Ilanka, to talk about the purpose of the Learning Network.
Hi, everyone. Thank you for joining us today, and continue to introduce yourself in the chat, like Dorinda was mentioning, with your name, organization, and location. You go to the next slide. So this week is pretty exciting here at Generations United. It is our Global Intergenerational Week of 2025. We're one of the U.S. co-leads for this week, with 17 countries taking part in the campaign led by Generations Working Together in Scotland and their team, and we'll be able to work with them and host different events this week. Today's event is focused on housing, so that's why we're really excited for the speaker that we have today. And this campaign has been able to highlight the amazing outcomes that can be achieved through intergenerational relationships and intergenerational community, and coming together and having that lasting impact of different generations interacting with one another. So be sure to get involved and look at the other posts that we have posted on LinkedIn, on our Instagram page, and use the hashtag GIW25, and then also some of the materials. And it's been a great collaboration with these organizations this week. And then the purpose of the Intergenerational Housing Learning Network. It was a learning network that was brought together for people working in the field and to promote more intergenerational housing solutions across the country that are accessible to people of all backgrounds and experiences. As we found more and more people are interested in this topic and so much work is being done in this field, we thought it would be a great opportunity to bring these people together so they can hear about new things that are happening in this field, as well as just get resource and build a community of one another, as oftentimes we hear they feel isolated by themselves. They don't know anyone in their area who's doing the work like them. So this is an opportunity to introduce them to other people and for them to learn from experts in the field as well. Slide. So who are the members of the Intergenerational Housing Learning Network? So there's intergenerational program practitioners, there's housing providers, experts on aging and youth development, researchers and advocates. There's people who are actually living in intergenerational housing and who love it, who have also joined us today. There's funders, there are policymakers, and government officials. So please be sure to introduce yourself in the chat and see who else is joining, maybe in the same area as you, or maybe a housing site you may have been interested in, and get the chance to build that sense of community. Next. And then first, just because we have a mixed crowd of different people, I always like to give this definition of what intergenerational housing is. So intergenerational housing is housing that combines people of different ages and offers intentional design features and programs that bring together people to maximize that social interaction and promote mutual support with one another. So it's that intentional design behind the housing sites to help elicit those intergenerational interactions with one another and help build that sense of community in different generations and populations while they're living together. Next slide. And then these are the list of different intergenerational housing types that we have seen pop up across America, as well as some globally, which is the first one is the affordable market rate, which is supportive housing, which usually is low income housing. There's some restrictions on income if you are able to live in that type of housing, or supportive housing for people who are transitioning out of homelessness and transitioning into housing that way. So there's different types that fall into that category there. And then there's like university-based retirement communities, which is located on university and college campuses, which have flipped those dorms or a senior home nearby so that they can use the facilities on campus, even though there are seniors living there and they may not be a student, but they're able to use the resources and the materials that the campus has to offer. And then intergenerational communities, which is intergenerational communities that were intentionally designed to elicit those intergenerational reactions with the members who are living in the community, whether they share a garden, a community area, community laundry room, a community space. And then, of course, intergenerational shared sites, which is like when a senior home is right next to a daycare and they do intergenerational activities and intergenerational interactions with one another. And then our kinship and grandfamilies housing, which is grandparents who are primarily raising their grandchildren as the primary caregiver, or kinship families, aunts, uncles, cousins, brothers, and sisters who are raising children. And they all live in these housing sites together as Dorina from Bridge Meadows was one of these wonderful sites as well. And then we have our home sharing where they share units together as well. And then co-housing where they're invited to live in a senior's home and share one of the rooms and they work out a deal, whether it's you do the laundry, do different activities while they help get some percentage off of their rent and they're able to share the housing that way. And then one of the other most popular one is the naturally occurring multi-generational homes when there's multiple generations living in the same home together, as in like you moved your grandmother in, you have your children in, and you're also living there as well. So that'd be three generations or more living in the home together, those naturally occurring homes. So those are some of the examples. There's tons of examples to apply to them as well. Next slide. And then I'll hand it back over to Dorinda, who will introduce our guest speaker for today as we continue to participate in Global Intergenerational Week.
Thank you, Ilaka. And I realized we didn't introduce ourselves. I'm Dr. Dorinda Schubert, and I'm honored to be a co-leader of this wonderful group. And I'm the executive director of Bridge Meadows in my day job. And Ilaka, would you like to say who you are?
Yes, just realized we didn't do that. Yes, I'm Ilaka Walker. I'm the Intergenerational Program Specialist at Generations United.
All right. Well, now let's introduce our guest speaker today. Savannah Fishel has visited over 50 intergenerational communal housing models. That sounds like such a good time, Savannah. In Australia and the United States, she's visited eco-villages, tiny home villages, and co-housing, and she came to Bridge Meadows. Fresh from her Churchill Fellowship, she'll be sharing with us some inspiring case studies, insights on the lived benefits of living communally, and what has helped these models work in practice. With a background in health policy and public service design in the UK, she's interested in the power of intergenerational housing to tackle loneliness, bridge generational divides, and provide an alternative to an increasingly individualistic society. So you can learn more about Savannah's work on her blog, thinkitforward.net, and we'll put that in the chat. And I think also Savannah gave us her email address for anybody who'd like to talk with her. So Savannah, welcome, and you certainly are among friends today. Glad to have you here with us today.
Thank you so much for having me and for that great intro. And happy Global Intergenerational Week, everyone. I'm really excited to share emerging insights from my project, which is exploring intergenerational communal housing models. I do welcome anyone who wants to connect with me. My email's on there in the chat and my website, and I'll have a final output coming in a few months, which I'll share to subscribers. But essentially today I'm going to try and give you a little bit of a flavor of what I've learned. Next slide, please. So before I dive into who I am and why I'm interrupting your otherwise wonderful week with my potentially grating English accent, I just want to tell you about one community that I visited in California. You may have heard of cohousing. Santa Rosa Creek Commons has many traits of a co-housing community, of which there's about 160 co-housing communities in the US, but this is actually a limited equity cooperative. So homes aren't bought or sold on the open market. Instead, if a member leaves, they get their initial investment plus modest interest. And I just wanted to mention it because it keeps the community affordable long term, and that's something people always go to first as a concern with co-housing. So at Santa Rosa Creek Commons, there's around 30 residents aged 0 to 80. They live intentionally together with their own private homes, but lots of shared spaces. It's a mixture of small families, couples, and singles. designed to create connection. There's 3 major buildings and they face a common space. There's a shared laundry room, there's a deck, there's gardens, and these create those natural gathering spots. Community life here is reciprocal. I've seen it. There's potlucks after meetings, wine and cheese evenings, rallying in times of need. For example, 63 rides were organised for a member who was undergoing chemotherapy. I spoke to a single dad who shared his experience and said to me, I look out my window, I see my kid pop into other apartments, talk to anybody, be herself. She's accepted, she's encouraged, she's thanked, and she understands boundaries. I also spoke to an older resident who explained that although she's not close friends with all 30 people, she is connected to everyone. And she said to me, I know if I need something, people are there. It's communities like this which are creating more socially connected and environmentally sustainable ways of living together across age groups that really sit in contrast to a lot of the world that's turning inward instead of outward. So it's communities like this that I'm going to be chatting about today. Next slide, please. So who am I? Why am I here on your screen? So as was said in the intro, I'm Savannah. I've just been overseas, funded by the Churchill Fellowship. I visited 53 communities. In England, I work as an innovation consultant and service designer for a non-profit across the public sector. And I've got a background in health policy and politics in and out of Parliament. But much more kind of relevantly and interestingly, on a personal level, in my life, some intergenerational friendships have shaped who I am. And I know that that is increasingly rare. In a nutshell, I think that how we live together across generations has profound implications on individual well-being, as I know, but also collective well-being and community resilience. Next slide, please. So I care about intergenerational friendships, so I started to do work in it, and I did a project with the Cares family. It was an amazing organisation, and it's now sadly closed due to funding. But I ran a service design project where I explored what are the barriers, drivers, and benefits of intergenerational friendships in my local area in East London. And I created tools like Chatter Matters, which is a inclusive conversation deck for all ages, where you can kind of color code what kind of conversations you want to have. And on my website, there's a storybook that basically charts the entire journey of the project and what I learned about intergenerational friendship. Next slide, please. I just wanted to give that as a bit of background, but today I'm not focusing on that project. I'm focusing on my Churchill Fellowship. So out of 53 communities, 37 of them that I visited were in the US, across California, Oregon, and Colorado, ranging from staying at one community for 10 days to some communities that I just visited for kind of an afternoon. I'm going to try to avoid jargon in this presentation, but I just want to say my scope was broad. So a lot of people will be familiar with cohousing. It wasn't just that. It included, yes, cohousing, but also other models. So urban and rural cooperatives, tiny home villages, eco-villages. Out of scope is anything short-term. So for me, I'm interested in long-term, permanent living that it stays with us through life stages. I excluded income-sharing communities and family-only households. So I'm looking at communal living here, different people coming together. Mostly I visited self-governed communities. So this is when a committed group of people tend to kind of make decisions and hold a lot of tasks like maintenance themselves. But I did include some staffed communities, so kind of supported independent housing blocks, but only when they had a really intentional focus on building community across generations. One that I went to was the amazing Bridge Meadows in Portland, which is for youth with experience of foster care, their families and single elders. I'm not going to talk about that today because a lot of people in the room are really aware of it. Just want to say that wording is evolving in this space. So if some of these terms are new to you, all of the definitions are going to be in my output, but I can answer questions on them today as well. Next slide, please. So my fellowship was guided by 2 questions. One, within increasingly individualistic societies, what intergenerational communal housing models exist? What benefits do they bring? And 2, what are the conditions that contribute to social cohesion between generations? What are the strategies or designs that can mitigate friction and help a community to really thrive? I just want to acknowledge some limitations of my approach. So it wasn't an academic study, it was experiential. I am not an expert. The experts on communal living are, of course, people who are living in these communities, and I'm going to try my hardest to centre their perspectives. My work also obviously carries biases, including time and financial constraints, selection bias, cultural bias, survivorship bias, because I primarily visited, successful communities. And I've also picked up a lot about the challenges and downfalls of communal living, and I write about that a bit in my blog, but I'm not going to focus on that today. I also just want to acknowledge the traditional owners of the land in Australia and in the US, the two places I conducted my research. And I just want to say that there's enduring impacts of colonization in both of these places, and these lands were never ceded. Just wanted to kind of headline with that, but let's dive in on the next slide. So why intergenerational living? I see it as a really exciting, practical response to some of the most complex challenges that we're facing around housing, health, and loneliness. Communities which are built with an intentional, everyday interaction across age groups really could increase people's social and support networks, reduce polarization, improve well-being, relieve pressure on public services, all whilst creating more eco-friendly living environments. Both the US and Australia, where I conducted my research, as well as the UK, are highly individualistic countries. We're all facing chronic loneliness, insecure housing, political polarization, disconnection. So I'm really interested in how pioneering communal living models have and continue to survive and thrive in a context like this. So next slide, please. This is all new stuff that I'm kind of speaking to you about now. So yeah, do get in touch. But I just added this because recently, if we go back to the last slide, thanks. Recently, I was at a round table and someone who set up a co-housing community said to me, why do you keep using the word intergenerational? Why don't you just talk about community? So I started my fellowship thinking, how do we encourage intergenerational engagement? What are the additional benefits? Now, kind of flip it on its head, and I find myself asking, why have we structured so much of society around strict age categories in the first place that everyone's going to grow out of? How many opportunities are we missing because of this age segregated design by default? Unless we die, every one of us is going to go through all of life stages. So if we design services, programs, housing in an age segregated way, we're inherently designing in the short-term way. So that's why intergenerational everything to me. Next slide, please. So like the US, the UK is really divided. Like I said, social fragmentation manifests in a lot of ways. We've got declining trust in institutions. We've got partitioned political issues, got narratives that are steeped in fearing one another. But one of the biggest social fractures really does lie between generations, and I'm assuming everyone in the room agrees. That's why you're here, probably. Here in the UK, the social enterprise United for All Ages has actually described Britain as one of the most age-segregated countries in the world, and it's called for urgent measures to tackle what it calls age apartheid. And the US is really, really similar in this way. In my experience, I know that individuals my age tend to have almost no interaction with older people outside of their family, or even have any idea who their neighbours are, don't know their names. Generational divides have been deepening. On the screen, I've recently had a go at mapping some reasons why this might be. So really briefly, why generational divides deepening? Well, economic disparities mean that younger generations are often hit harder with stagnant wages and higher costs. Political polarization often splits voting across age lines. Family formations and work expectations have transformed dramatically. Housing and community segregation has occurred. So, for example, around rural and urban splits. Also, age-segregated housing, such as retirement communities. Technology creates different information consumption habits. Media amplifies stereotypes, framing issues as kind of zero-sum conflicts across generations. I'm going to show you an example. If we go to the next slide, you can see some recent headlines that really just don't help this division. Some are silly, like blaming a whole generation for the demise of mayonnaise, which to me seems to be doing just fine. I think mayo's doing okay, but anyway, what do I know? But some headlines are much more sinister, calling a whole generation sociopathic or brushing a whole generation, we see it all the time, with a laziness brush when it comes to Gen Z. So next slide, please. I've explained, or I've tried to, why I'm so interested in intergenerational housing. But what I've actually learned about the benefits of living together, of living more communally. I've synthesized 6 here. So 1, sharing the load, top right there. For instance, collaboration during times of crisis, chore sharing, shared childcare. If we jump onto the next slide, I just want to show a quote to demonstrate this. One resident at a cooperative said to me, as a single dad, if I get home late from work, there's always people here. It's like my daughter has lots of aunts and uncles. People watch out for each other. So jump onto the next slide, please. So that's sharing the load. Next, we've got efficient and sustainable consumption. I'm going round to the right. So this is all about reducing waste, sharing resources. Let's just, in this virtual room, take a moment to think about the fact that outside of communities like this, almost everyone on a street will have a separate washing machine, a separate car, a separate toolbox, separate kids' games, board games. And most of these things all spend their life dormant. So that's efficient and sustainable consumption. Next, health, well-being, personal growth, social stimulation, cognitive engagement, skill sharing. 4th, affordability and convenience. So we're thinking here about collective purchasing, really common in these communities, shared amenities, and in some cases more compact living arrangements, which does require a bit of a cultural shift around how we think about space. I do just want to say briefly, like I mentioned at the beginning, some models can be expensive, some models are exclusive. In my research, I've tried really hard to focus on communities that have affordability mechanisms built in, and I'm going to give some tangible examples later. 5th, cultural enrichment and resilience. So for instance, around empathy and advice. Finally, up the top there, of course, social connection, reducing isolation, building a sense of belonging, and finding opportunities for meaningful contribution. So here's 6 benefits, and these are all for residents. But what I've also been seeing is amazing benefits that ripple outwards onto broader society, not just the people actually living in these communities. So this is things like alleviating burdens on public services, creating community assets that communities come and use in the same way that, you know, a church or a library is used. I don't have time to share what I've found about the benefits for broader society, but it is something I'm really interested in. I've got an article coming out on that in a few weeks. So before moving into what helps these communities work and sustain in practice, I'm going to give you 3 examples of these communities. Next slide, please. Thank you. So Los Angeles Eco Village is an amazing urban intentional cooperative. It's built on ecological principles, of course, and it's in its 32nd year on the ground. A land trust has helped to ensure that it stays permanently affordable. When recruiting members, residents ensure the co-op is diverse across the following areas: age, ethnicity, gender, household composition, and income levels. One 84-year-old resident said a particularly funny quote which stood out, and forgive me, it's not the most professional thing to come out of my mouth, but it is powerful and it is what he said. He said that the intergenerational aspect of living in LA Eco Village is particularly important. He said being around a homogenous group is like farting yourself to death and thinking that's reality. He went on to explain the importance of diverse groups, bringing different perspectives, building empathy, and as he said, keeping him young. Residents told me that this eco village, which does a huge amount to support and educate the local community, is a haven of mutual aid and it sits within an anonymous and often ruthless city. Childcare is often shared, and with their biodiversity work, it's one of the only places in the city that you can hear birds. Next slide, please. So Wild Sage and Silver Sage Village in Colorado took a really innovative approach where there's 2 adjacent co-housing communities. And so it integrates senior-specific and intergenerational living. 40% of units in both of these communities are classified as affordable. Residents who live here have described their goal as living in a way that is more fulfilling and fun. Some senior residents have actually moved from Wild Sage to Silver Sage. And the reason that they've given is they've said that families and seniors are often not around at the same times. And sometimes there's clashing expectations, for instance, around noise. So this model is an interesting one because it provides that kind of separation, but there's also intergenerational integration. Silver Sage is an independent, it's not an assisted living community. None of them that I visited are, but they have lots of processes in place, such as a buddy system, which provide that kind of neighbourly mutual aid and those check-ins. Next slide, please. The last example I'm going to give you is the Village. It's part of the thriving co-living movement in San Francisco. So this is often lumped into the cooperative movement, though actually many buildings like the Village are actually owned by a landlord and rented out by residents. So there's 13 adult residents, a mixture of parents and non-parents, but everyone who lives there intentionally came together because they want to live a more connected life, and specifically, they want children in their life. Alongside lots of spontaneous communal time, such as co-working, childcare, residents build connection and relationships through shared meals, monthly craft nights, which are also open to non-residents, and clearings at the start of every meeting. So this is a kind of emotional check-in to encourage people to be open and share challenges straight up and just kind of deal with them head on. The space that I visited has many homey quirks, such as a wall of what kids said. One really sweet quote on the wall, which I don't know if you can read there, but it says, so a child said, "Wow, this present is a boot." And then after opening the next present, "Wow, a second boot." So they've got kind of, you know, a lot of things to make it feel really homely. One resident told me about the power of parenting as a really special means to connect with other adults. And she described it powerfully as shared struggle and shared play. And she said that living as a single parent before she moved here, she struggled to even be able to take a shower because she couldn't leave her kid on her own. Here, rent is slightly cheaper than you can generally find in the neighbourhood, which partially comes from a deal that they got when signing the lease on the house. So next slide, please. So when was the last time that people in this virtual room, when was the last time you chatted to a neighbour, lent someone nearby a DIY hand, or just stopped for a chat? Perhaps you are in a fortunate minority who've developed strong bonds along your street, but for many of us in Western society, and I rent in London, it's definitely the same for me, especially in urban environments, the art of neighbouring has faded. And with it, I think we've lost a really priceless social currency. Visiting these communities was a really powerful experience for me. I had many beautiful interactions and moments of community care myself, including one community which had to jumpstart my car in the pouring rain at 7 a.m. twice. And another, someone else at a different community who helped me ice and really bad ant sting in Australia. So just lots of small moments of community care. So I've started to use this term neighborisms, and I'm just testing it out with you all today. But it's a term that I've used to describe the everyday acts of support, care, and interest in one another that flourish in communal living environments, but remain so rare in broader society. Next slide, please. Some examples of neighborisms are on the screen here. I'm talking about things like returning misdelivered post, offering some tech or translation support, celebrating a milestone together, or even a wave or a chat. Even tiny gestures like this are powerful and we should not underestimate them. They create trust, they create belonging, and they create security. And these are all hallmarks of a resilient society. They remind us that we're not individuals occupying separate spaces. We are all part of a larger independent whole. In thriving communal living spaces, neighborisms are the norm, not the exception, and I've seen that with my own eyes. But these micro communities, they exist in this broader society that we're all living in, this capitalist society where mistrust and competition dominate. So what is it that makes this culture and these micro communities so different? My research has surfaced some key building blocks that create the conditions for neighborisms to flourish. So essentially what I'm talking about here is building blocks that allow a community to become more than just housing, to become a real community. So next slide, please. This is what I've learned about what it takes for intergenerational communities to thrive. Of course, they're not exhaustive and they're not prescriptive. So if we start on the bottom, physical foundation. So the built environment is really important. It needs to support aging in place. So that we're talking about things like accessibility here, but it also needs to support transition opportunities as needs change. So this could be a growing family. Multi-purpose spaces are really important to accommodate diverse activities. Intentional design needs to facilitate that balance between privacy and connection. Green space, really important, as well as shared practical spaces like laundry or having mailboxes together, all important for spontaneous connection. That's physical foundation. So if we move up to social infrastructure, I'm here talking about the rhythms and rituals. So for example, food, which is super important, as well as co-developed community agreements, processes, particularly around things like decision-making and conflict resolution. And I write a lot about conflict in my blog because I'm interested in it. And then on the top, we have belonging and purpose. So here I'm talking about things like skill sharing, personal acknowledgement of one another, celebration of milestones, rituals such as welcoming rituals, embracing changing dynamics as people come and go. That's really important, kind of embracing that evolution. So in a nutshell, I know I'm moving fast, but those are the building blocks for these kind of thriving communities. So if we go on to the next slide, clearly having a mix of generations is absolutely critical for the success of many of these models. At one co-housing community that I visited, a resident said to me, if I lived in a senior community, it'd drive me crazy. No matter how crazy it gets here, having kids around is enlivening and invigorating. And I think enlivening is a really important word there, and it really kind of draws on the health benefits, the mental health benefits, the physical health benefits. So this is my last slide, the next one. I just want to leave you with some humongous questions that I think these communities invite us to consider. How is it that we want to live and age? Why are so many of us dissatisfied with current housing arrangements and lack of social connection? How can we undo what I see as manufactured, designed in generational divides? How can we reconnect and support one another across age groups? There's no one answer to these questions, but what there is and what I'm learning about is a rich spectrum of ways that we can live differently and ways that we can make meaningful connection beyond our nuclear family, across age groups, part of our everyday life. And there's pioneers in the US and elsewhere who are doing this and they're making it a reality. So I see reimagining how we live together a really important part of making us more resilient for the myriad challenges that we're facing as a society. I know this has been a bit of a whistle-stop tour, but all the diagrams and case studies and lots more will be in my output with more detail. On the screen is my website and my email, as well as there's on my website, there's things like podcast interviews and articles. But I'd love to stay in touch. I'd love to keep connected with anyone here. So that's it for me. Thank you for your attention.
Savannah, thank you. I find myself grinning the whole time, going, "Oh my gosh, there's a fellow I don't know, I guess we're all cousins and siblings in this work that some of us on this have been doing for a very, very long time. And I loved your energy, and I loved all of the way you have organized things and those beautiful diagrams. And when you said manufactured generational divides, that has been something that has been said to me repeatedly. I had someone say to me, Dorinda, it's as though we have to be reprogrammed. We always have lived intergenerationally. Many cultures live intergenerationally naturally. So the fact that you said manufactured really struck home for me. But I'm wondering, when you visited, I'll get this started, but everybody, please put your questions in the chat, and the team will monitor those, and then we will make sure to ask those of Savannah. And congratulations on all this work, by the way, Savannah. It looks like it was a whole lot of fun and a whole lot of adventure, especially the ant sting and the car problems. But so thank you for persevering and giving light to what all this intergenerational work is. So can you talk about what were some of the reasons you heard, like what drew people to the different co-housing communities? Like how long did they talk about how long they were looking for it? Can you give some colorful information about the before? And you're on mute.
Yeah, I can, and I think it's a really interesting question. I did some thinking around halfway through my trip of who are these people, who is drawn here, because I think I came across when I was speaking to people at home about what I was doing, a lot of stereotypes around hippies or certain type of people, or whoever. So I think a lot of people were experiencing transition. So many people who moved into communal living are in the midst of life changes. This might be kids up and left, empty nest syndrome, might be divorce, gender transition, new parenthood, really common, death. I think people searching for stability during these shifts and realizing that reliance on nuclear family isn't always kind of steadfast. There's also, I think there's the intentional seekers, and then there's the happy accidents. So intentional people who are actively searching for this deeper connection, hunting for communities for decades sometimes. And then there's some who stumble into the spaces. Sometimes they're there because of affordability or environmentalism. There's one person said to me, which really stuck with me, in an urban eco-village in Adelaide, said to me, I came here like because of environmental reasons. I really believed in whatever it was. And I have realized that there is nothing more important for sustainability than the social rituals. And they came as kind of a lone wolf, not interested in that. That I hear about that a lot. So there's also kind of community contributors, people who just are generally dedicated to making a positive impact in society, and who want a kind of base to do that and other people around them to do that. So yeah, I think those are some of the kind of groups. Does that answer your question?
Oh, yes, yes, of course. Yes, we have also seen that relatives have found our intergenerational community for other relatives. So that's been kind of nice. Like, hey, mom, you need this. So the crew here has some questions for you, Savannah. So I'm going to go ahead and read those. Laura's asking about the legal and economic structures in some of these communities. And you mentioned a land trust and a limited equity co-ops. Do you have any comments or reflections on those, or any more information?
I do. I would say also, I think one of the main takeaways is it was really hard to spot patterns across 53. There are so many different ways of doing this, and a lot of the ways are only possible in that location, or are were set up at a time where there was certain policy that was supportive of communal living that's now defunct and not possible anymore. And that I'm not saying that to kind of dissuade people. I'm just saying there's most certainly not a kind of course to chart legally. A few reflections, I would say, examples. There's community land trusts. It's kind of when it's separate the ownership of the land from the ownership of the homes. So it kind of creates a possibility for permanent affordability and community governance over land use, a really powerful way to prevent speculative resale. Limited equity housing co-ops can cap the resale value of homes to maintain affordability. Again, another key mechanism. Tend to work well in urban contexts where market pressures are high. I think I'm particularly interested in how some of these legal or economic structures intersect with social agreements in intentional communities, and stewardship of community assets. So there's a lot of important things to consider. One community that I visited in Australia, it's just owned by a couple, and they tried for such a long time to create this community in a really collaborative way legally, and just everything was against them. So eventually they just did it themselves, and they're the only people who own the property, and they try in every other way to make it kind of collaborative. But power dynamic is something that is really important to consider. And I think there's a lot of emerging examples of hybrid models. So for example, co-housing project combined with a land trust, or partnerships with affordable housing providers where a percent of the homes are affordable. So yeah, there's lots going on. And what people who are particularly beady-eyed would have noticed about my project is when I said at the beginning my guiding questions, they weren't actually focused on funding or policy. Obviously I've picked up a lot around that, and I'm really interested in, but they were more focused on kind of the social side.
I've had it said to me, when you made one community, you've made one community. There, no two communities are alike. And we've certainly seen that. All right. Another question is, how is it possible to keep a mix of all the generations, or to keep a mix of all generations, and then also be permanent? Like in a limited size community, everybody's aging all the time. So how do you have this combination of permanency, but people are aging, and keep those generations connected?
Great question. So the first thing I would say is permanency doesn't mean stagnancy. It means evolution. And I think the communities that really struggle are closed off to that evolution and see it as negative change and try to keep it in one place. It's not possible. It's not going to happen. It's on long-term living, people are going to come and go. And so there needs to be that space for evolution and change. Aging communities are a real challenge. Some communities I visited are just desperate for younger families to come in. And there's concerns about, maintenance and the amount of land that they may have started with 20 years ago that seemed like a great idea, and now they're aging and they're struggling to look after it. One community basically funded around half of one of the houses so that a young family could move in. So because obviously there's affordability differences across generations. So yeah, one community was kind of so desperate to diversify their age that they pulled together funding for one of the houses. I think thoughtful recruitment and move-in processes are really important. So kind of some communities are actively prioritizing age, but also thinking about when people are there, how is it inclusive? So like a really small example is meeting times. I've heard so much about people being excluded because it doesn't fit with bedtime, or it doesn't fit with school time, or it doesn't fit with meal time. And things like food, if you're going to serve fish soup, you're probably not going to get young people turning up. So it's about like diversifying every possible aspect of interaction so different people can engage, and then designing, like I said, for aging in place, for turnover. So, how can people transition? Can people move from this place to this place within it? And that helps create that permanency.
Yes. Savannah, when you said making sure that the times are right and the food is right and are intergenerational, our friends, Terry, who is here today, they've created an intergenerational package, and Terry could talk about it, where that is one of the questions. Is this activity we're going to do intergenerationally? Have we thought about every generation? And you have to, it's so interesting how frequently our brains go to that manufactured age division and not, well, will this be okay for a 5-year-old and a 15-year-old and a 25 and 45 and 85? So
Yeah.
thanks for sharing that. So folks have some questions. Hello, Erica. Have some questions about conflict. Certainly, this is a conversation that happens a lot at Bridge Meadows. So, just because we bring people together, we have to understand that it's not nirvana, it's not utopia, and people are going to have conflict because people are people and we're a little bit messy and we have differences of opinions. And so, what did you witness or hear about or learn about in your journey about how conflict was dealt with in the communities?
So the main thing that I took away about communities that had what I see as a positive approach to conflict is all about proactiveness, or being proactive. So there is no community, and I'm not just talking about housing community, there is no way of bringing people with different experiences, different backgrounds, different traumas, different triggers, different ways of interacting that isn't going to develop some conflict. So the sooner that community realizes that and puts in some proactive measures, the better. One person said to me, conflict is like, what did they say? A knot, basically. And if you leave a knot, if you think about your back or a knot in knitting or whatever, then it will get other threads in it and it will become bigger and bigger and bigger and harder to undo. But right at the beginning, it's much easier. And that's not going to kind of solve all your issues, but there's various different approaches to taking a proactive approach to conflict that I've seen. And I think also understanding that people have different communication styles. And I don't know if this is a big thing in the US, it probably is, but in the UK, often people talk about love languages. I think there's also definitely conflict languages. People have different ways of that they prefer. Some people need space. Some people just want to go and sort it out straight away. Some people are more passive, and some people, so just, I think, understanding that and giving space for that, it's not easy to do, and it's very different from the world we live, where if we don't like our neighbor, slam the door, probably never ever see them again in the next 10 years living next to them. It takes a different mindset, but yeah.
Yes, I think your comment about the shared agreements is so important, and also a shared path for how this community will deal with conflict, because you have so many people with those different conflict languages. I'm going to borrow that, Savannah. And you, in having a shared language about how we're going to deal with conflict, I also think can have some settling in help people with that issue.
Yeah.
So so thanks for sharing that, Savannah. Okay, so Terry, my buddy, has a question about, are there architects and housing developers that are beginning to design and offer these kinds of living opportunities? Because a lot of folks don't have the time or resources to design and build co-living situations, and having developers who know how to do that would be, I'm going to quote Terry, fantastic. And so in addition to Savannah's knowledge, Terry, Erica and us, we could talk to you about it. But go, Savannah. I want to hear what you heard from your communities.
I'll give my headlines, and yeah, do come in. So yes, the answer is yes. It's a really exciting kind of area of development because, as you say, not everyone has the time, money, or networks to start a co-housing community. And something that my research doesn't cover, but that I've heard about, is the amount that fail. The average length of a co-housing community is, I can't remember what it is, but it's shockingly short. But there's a lot of things happening in the space. So there's architect-led intergenerational housing projects. So some architecture firms are specializing in co-living, multi-generational, community-led housing. And then there's developers, which are entering the intergenerational and communal living market. So obviously mainstream developers are cautious and driven by kind of financial constraints, obviously. But there is growing interest in a housing market that includes things like co-living and community-focused developments. There's a lot of organizations out there that do really practical work, co-housing solutions, and others which offer development consultancy and project management services for intentional communities. So I think some of the stuff that makes this new area possible is conversations like this. There's more talk about it. If people become aware of it, that's how the movement grows. So yeah, also increased public sector interest and, to be honest, desperation around things like loneliness, housing, aging, community resilience. There's some affordable housing policy shifts in some cities. Yeah, I'll stop there.
Savannah, you mentioned the word policy before I go on to the other question. What were some policies? Did you hear of some policies that these co-housing and eco-village folks found helpful for them to create it? Because when you use affordable housing dollars to make these, the policies, it's really it's a contortionist activity. So did you hear any? It's okay if you didn't.
I did. Yeah, I will do my best with this. I'm not a policy expert. So I'll just start with one example. Queen City Cooperative in Colorado, I think. The person who ran that, the person who set that up, Sarah, they fought for that to be possible, and they changed local law around non-families living together in a single dwelling unit. So that's just an example, but I would say key types of policies that support this type of living is zoning reforms. So a lot of cities have outdated zoning laws that restrict shared living. Supportive policies would allow clustered housing, accessory dwelling units. So also things like policies around something small, like having a tiny home in a garden can, start to create some sort of community, having a couple of tiny homes. There's also recognizing community land trust models within land use policy. There's also obviously things around seed funding, loan guarantees, tax credits. And then there's just something broader that I'll mention around how we benefit nuclear families, married couples, straight couples, and that's just something to consider who that's benefiting.
Yes, it's you have so much knowledge, Savannah, in a short amount of time that you did that work. That's amazing. Okay, my last question before we wrap up is, what is there any kind of database where these communities already exist and are looking for members?
Yeah, absolutely. I'm assuming the person who asked that is US based. So there's a few. There's the Foundation for Intentional Community Directory, FIC directory. There's Co-housing Association of the US, where I met some of the people on this call. So Coho US is what it's called. I would say those are the two main ones for the US. A lot of these databases tend to be out of date. That doesn't mean that there's not a lot of relevant stuff in there. There will be. But I would say sign up to kind of emails and newsletters and things, because stuff comes up all the time and it's changing all the time, and it's hard for these databases to keep up to date with so little funding behind these organizations.
Savannah, I have one last question for you. What's next? Because this has been an incredible experience for you and for all of us to learn from you. What's your next step? What do we get to look forward to?
Good question. Something I'm going to ask myself in the mirror at some point. But essentially, the first major thing is I've not published an output from this yet. That will be published around July. What I'm doing in the UK at the moment is trying to convene experts across housing, health, aging, loneliness, and intergenerational practice to ask them what next, because what I can do is provide some inspiring examples. But yeah, so we're looking at I'm looking at policy levers in the UK. I'm speaking about this wherever I can. So if anyone knows of places I can go, places I can write, whatever, because I think a huge part of it is just about sharing, chatting. And what I'm hoping is, if I do more of that, the answer to what next will come to me. But yeah, in the short term, it's an output which I'll share on thinkitforward.net.
Savannah, you have been so inspiring, and I just have enjoyed. I'm so happy I got to finally meet you because my team got to meet you, but I didn't get to meet you. So thank you for sharing. Thank you for your hard work, and welcome to the club is what I want to say. And I am looking forward to staying in touch with you. And I think you have many friends on this group here who are going to be in touch with you and do anything we can to come alongside you and probably pick your brain as well. So thank you, Savannah, for taking the time today. Thank you for your hard work and your interest, and looking forward to staying connected.
Thank you so much. Yeah, and just an open invite for anyone to connect with me. Thank you for listening and having me. I really appreciate it.
Before I turn it back to Ilanka, Terry says that there's a place you might want to speak, and it's the International Federation of Settlement Houses in Liverpool this year with their annual meeting. So it's in the chat, and perhaps, Terry, you could provide your email address for Savannah. All right. Well, thank you, everybody. And Ilanka, back to you.
Thank you, Dorinda. Thank you, Savannah. That was a wonderful presentation. And thank you for sharing with us today. Could you go to the next slide, Adina? So if we're getting ready for our Generations United 23rd biannual conference, so you can continue to have more exciting conversations like this, we hope to see you all there. It's going to be taking place on June 25th through the 27th this year, and it's going to be located in Louisville, Kentucky. It still is time to register. So please register if you haven't done so yet. It's going to be a great opportunity to interact with different intergenerational leaders. There's going to be over 100 workshops and educational sessions. There's going to be tons of professionals there, and there's unlimited opportunities to network and connect. And the opening plenary sessions are going to be really exciting as we have the Withers families coming. The Bill Withers family's coming, and also the Ali Center as we're talking about the Compassion Index as well. And then we also have some exciting we have some exciting events at the closing session as well with the Nona's film, which will feature on Netflix. So it's going to be such an exciting time to come out and watch these plenary sessions, as well as get a chance to interact with other people in the field. So we hope to see you all there. Can you go to the next slide? Thank you. And then if you want to stay connected with us, please scan the QR code, and that will connect you to our social media pages, as well as sign you up for Generation This Week, where we showcase different information that will be relevant to people in this field, as well as any upcoming events, any news, or any information that could be helpful to you while working with Generation United, and also any additional resources that we may create. Next slide. And lastly, we'll just say thank you. Thank you for joining us today. Thank you, Savannah, for speaking. And if you want any additional information from me, or to learn more about the Intergenerational Housing Learning Network, feel free to email me, which is iwalker@gu.org, or if you want any more information about Generations United or Bridge Meadows. Thank you so much for joining us today.
Thank you, everybody. It's been wonderful. And I hope we get to see many of you at the Generations United conference, because it's a little bit like a family reunion. We get to see everybody who's really wanting to make sure that our world lives a lot more connected across the generations. So thank you, everybody. It's been wonderful to see you. And to my dear friends, good to see you. Take care.